Welcome back to Chat News at Noon. It's time to focus once again on your money because it's Wealth Wednesday. Brian Widmer is here to speak on recent market performance and common investment mistakes. So the stock markets have been pretty strong this year. Is there anything investors need to bear in mind because of the strength of the stock market?
Well, I mean, it feels good, right? It's nice bounce back after a couple of years ago that we've been seeing, kind of driven by certain companies, not the whole market, but everybody's been doing okay. But I think it's important to keep in mind that markets do ebb and flow, right? And it's not to be afraid of them, but recognize that they go up and they go down.
Yes.
So just as we caution people during bad times, it's important to make sure we're not making mistakes in good times too. You know.
Mistakes. Why don't we use that as the topic of our next question? What are some common mistakes that everybody seems to make?
I think, that everybody makes. There's always the same few that come up. And whether it's from overconfidence or from fear, having those mistakes in your management of your money, they pile up and eventually they have a pretty big impact. So one that we see the most is trying to time the market.
Okay.
You know, I think it's pretty natural to want to cash out when things are good and sit there on the sidelines waiting to avoid that big market downturn, because normal to want to avoid a risk like that. But predicting when to buy or when to sell, I mean, that's a guessing game that very, very few people have consistently won. Even missing out on just a small period of strong performance can have a big long-term impact. For example, if you put $1,000 in US stocks 25 years ago, it'd be worth about $6,500 today. And then obviously you can times that by however much money you have. But if you had sold out along the way at the worst possible time, you just decided, I'm going to sit on the sidelines, and you missed the best week. Just the best week in 25 years. Instead of $6,500, you'd have something more like $5,400. So that's about a 15% lower nest egg later in life because of one missed week.
Yeah. Now, unless those stocks were Microsoft, IBM, Apple, that switches it all up.
Actually, let's talk about that, because what we've seen for the last year and a half is greatly driven by those companies. There's a term called the Magnificent Seven. Now they're kicking Tesla out of that name because it hasn't done so well. But a lot of people, when these things happen and certain companies drive the market, a lot of people buy into that hype and think that this dominance will continue forever, and they will continue to be the outperformers. Now, Canadians might remember Nortel or BlackBerry or any of these other stories.
I know them both well.
Yeah, and it's not to say that it'll happen again, but it'll probably happen again. Just who knows with which names. But history has kind of told us that once these fast-growing companies become the largest companies in a market, their period of outperformance gets a little harder. I mean, it's harder to speed up a cruise ship than it is a small boat, right?
Yeah, well, and with the U.S. government looking at the potential to call Apple a monopoly, that could change everything. So what is a wise approach then for most investors to go into?
Yeah, I think the wise thing is always the boring thing, right? It's to sit down with your advisor, come up with a diversified portfolio that yes, has quality companies, and if you want to be active about it, go ahead and be active, but generally staying diversified, staying in the market. If you diversify across companies and industries and even countries, it reduces risk, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't stop you from making money when times are good.
Right.
And it doesn't stop you from helping your financial plan come to fruition and growing your wealth. So yeah, just sticking with it. Sticking with it,
sit down with an advisor, that's always good.
That's always good.
All right. You've given us a lot to think about. Brian Widmer from TD Wealth has been here. It's been Wealth Wednesday on Chat Television. I'm Dan Reinish. Brian, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for this hour or this edition of the show. We'll be back at 5 with all the latest for you. Thank you very much for watching.